Okay, and my final story, and I expect most of you are aware that we're having a solar eclipse in August. It's sort of getting hard to not notice. A lot of media attention happening. So I just wanted to do a few quick things about this. This is just a time lapse of the progression over several hours from beginning of eclipse to the end. Here in Denver, we're going to be something like 92% total, I think, and so it'll be a slimmer crescent than that. And this is just showing how eclipses happen. Of course, we have the moon coming between the Earth and the sun, and the moon, we're in this sort of lucky coincidence or period in time where the moon is essentially the same diameter as the sun viewed from the Earth. And so when the geometry is just right, it can completely block the disk of the sun, and then you see the atmosphere of the sun, the corona. What causes problems, if you will, and why we don't have a total eclipse every single month is because, first of all, the moon is in an elliptical orbit. And so it actually changes in apparent diameter by, my memory is failing me, but it's on order of, it's a little less than 10%, I think. And so when the moon is farthest away from the Earth, when the geometry is right for an eclipse, then we get what's called an annular eclipse, where you're still seeing the disk of the sun around the edge of the moon. So that's not the same as total. And then the second complicating factor is the moon its orbit is slightly tilted. And so it's not always directly between the Earth and the sun. Sometimes it's a little higher, sometimes it's a little lower, and when it's, totally out of whack, which is most of the time, then you don't get an eclipse at all. But if it's close enough to being on center where you can still see the moon covering up part of the sun, that's when we get partial eclipses. And this is just reinforcing that. So the orbit is tilted about 5 degrees, so it's not all that frequent that we see total eclipses, although somewhere in the world there are a couple a year typically. Okay, so I just wanted to show a couple of I think, are really cool images. So this is from the Discover spacecraft. It used to be called GORSAT back in the early 2000s. It finally got launched several years ago. It sits about about 1.6 million kilometers closer to the sun than the Earth. And so it's you always see a full Earth, and then when the moon is actually such that it crosses between the Earth and the spacecraft, then you actually see the moon coming through the field as well. And so this is what I always like to think this is a great view of these exoplanet finding systems like the Kuiper, the Kuiper Kepler, spacecraft. If instead of looking at the Earth, we were looking at the sun, and we have a planet coming between us and that star, then you're going to get a dip in the brightness when that planet is occulting any part of the star. And that's the detection mechanism. It's called the transit method, where you just follow the brightness and you get a little blip of a dip, and you can tell how big and how fast the occluding object is moving. And so that's one way to look at this. And then from the same spacecraft, it can actually see the shadow when there is the right geometry for it to see a total eclipse. And so this was an eclipse in March of 2016. It was over the South Pacific. I think you could see it as a partial eclipse as far east as Hawaii. But so here's the shadow, and here's a video of the shadow moving across the Earth. So if you were right in the middle of that shadow, you'd be having a total eclipse. And so that's what's going to happen in this neck of the woods in August 21st.